So good afternoon. It's 1:04 and I'm calling the meeting of CC Power to order. I see 5 directors on so far with another one joining soon. So we do have a quorum and we just got Director Hale as well. Welcome. And so there were no matters subsequent to posting the agenda. So I'd like to turn to public comment first. And if you have a comment, please raise your hand. See, we do have some members of the public here. And I also see Director Mitchell is in the public area. So she could be promoted over now. I don't see any hands raised, so we'll close public comment and move to the consent calendar and 2 items, the minutes of November 20 and a resolution adopting meeting dates for 2025 and 2026. Is there anyone wishing to pull an item from consent? I see. Oh, okay. And let's check for any public comment on the consent calendar. Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll move approval of consent.
Silicon Valley moves, and I think that was 3CE seconded. Okay, thanks. So let's call that item.
Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF.
Yes.
I do not believe we have Peninsula Clean yet this morning. Redwood Coast Energy Authority.
I think I have to abstain because I wasn't at the last meeting. Does that sound right?
I think it's your decision.
Yeah, I have no concerns, Laurie, with you voting. It's minutes and most notably the calendar, which we want to adopt for the next couple of years.
Say yes.
Do we have Laura yet? Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
Yes. Sorry.
San Jose.
I'm a yes.
I was a yes too.
Sonoma Clean Power.
Yes.
And Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
The consent agenda carries. Thank you.
Thanks. So before we get into the regular calendar, I just wanted to note the closed session at the end of the meeting. We're expecting no report out and expecting to adjourn the meeting coming out of close. So I just wanted to make sure the board is okay reordering the agenda so that item 8, discussion of any individual items, can come before the closed session to make the meeting flow a little better. So seeing no protest, I just wanted to alert that, and then I'll turn it over to General Manager Morris. So we'll
Yes,
go to the
welcome.
regular calendar. Thanks.
Okay, so here we are into the regular agenda. Welcome to December, everybody. Good to have you all here for our final meeting of the year. We should have a relatively brief meeting and a few items, Chair Cyphers. So let me start with the general manager report, and we'll give you a bunch of updates about what's coming. This is also a chance for some light discussion on some of the operational topics, since we're all here as the board. So what I wanted to cover first is a bit on work planning and what's coming down the pike. We'll also cover a bit of anticipated phase 2s where we're starting to formulate that, and I'll share what's going to go into those go, no go decisions that will likely come before the board. We'll do a quick update on the power pool exploration and then on some bulk buys, and then I'll report out on GM activity. So as a quick reminder, next slide, please. We're still using our phasing process, which is the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. This phasing structure is pretty core to CC Power. Phase 1 really covers where we consider new ideas, and we do that through working groups where all members have access. So it's paid for by the shared G&A dollars. And then only after that do we put up paywalls, and only interested members would opt into phase 2s, where we actively try to work out the terms and conditions of a signable deal. And then phase 3 would be the ongoing operations and execution of a project. So phase 2 really is where we start to get into asking members if they're truly interested in something, and then willing to explore it further, and then that would tee them up for the phase 3 decision. And so we can go to the next slide. Going back to our work plan, this links to our budget. Here's a similar mapping of the phase 1, 2, and 3, but it shows sort of in the work plan what we were looking at in phase 1, what we're looking at in phase 2, or what we expect will come forward for a decision in phase 2, and then what we expect may or will come forward in phase 3, in addition to our existing power projects. So under phase 1, the work plan indicated we would continue to follow up on offshore wind explorations, really building us towards a potential phase 2 decision, which we are getting close to. We would also continue to look at the possible benefits of an RA power pool. And then we would look at some master service agreement structures to see if there was potential interest in value there for members. And then depending on what moves forward, the phase 2s in the beginning of the year were planned to be build transfer agreement, phase 2A, and then 2B. 2B really being once we have a short list and understand the options in front of us, who wants to move into negotiations. A possible phase 2 on the RA power pool, and a possible phase 2 on CODIMO, and then also an incremental RFP for related or other capacity that the organization's members may want to pursue. And then in some instances, it's easy to skip the phase 2 because we already have a negotiated structure and members can choose to participate or not in phase 3. The topics there would be the Gridwell RA report, which you'll see a vote on today, Wood Mackenzie subscription, which is about data sets and information reports, training services, some possible prepay prep that relates to our existing geothermal projects, and then SC selection also relating to our existing energy storage contracts. So that's just a level set, and we can now step forward into what's coming down the pike, where we're at in this process. So we're looking at some upcoming anticipated phase 2s that I wanted to just spend a bit of time on. We know we're getting close to these because the phase 1 work is nearing completion. We've been socializing a lot of this work with the working groups. We're actually learning a lot working with your staff about how to design the structure and process for socializing ideas, and we'll improve that in the work planning going forward. For now, we've been heavily relying on the resource planning working group as our main discussion body for a lot of these power project ideas. And then the idea is for us to wrap up phase 1 and come back to the members and the board with a phase 2 go, no go decision. And in that, you would really want to see a clear understanding of the project, typically some sign of support from the resource planning working group. You'd have a pretty clear statement of work, a not to exceed total, and a cost share plan. And then lastly, you'd have indications of member interest, so that when we do come to the board with a phase 2 go, no go, it's somewhat apparent what is being sought, how much it would cost, who would be participating roughly. And then, depending on the outcome of that go, no go decision, members may opt in to pursue that project further. And so as we get close to that, we're working on that for a couple ripening phase 2 go, no go decisions, a long duration energy storage tolling agreement, a wind PPA, and a CODIMO phase 2, which would really be more than just contract negotiation, but it may also look for engagement and support for that unique project and a potential role for CC Power and members in that project. So those are what's coming down the pike, and jumping back up to that middle section to prepare you for any future votes on that. What we'd like to remind you of is we'll come to you with a scope of work, a total and not to exceed, and a cost share plan. There's some art here because when we're estimating project costs, we really want to lean on the project participants for deciding how to spend the money. A good example would be, does the project team want to do more diligence on a project? If they do, that could be increased costs on the project team members, but it may make sense to do that based on who's participating. And so when we estimate the budget and the total not to exceed, it may include costs that could not be incurred. And so we're balancing between trying to reasonably estimate costs while still not having to come back to the board too often for additional authorities for spending, and to make sure that the project advisory subcommittee, which would be really where the project participants shape the project, have the right amount of control. So all of that would go into these phase 2 budget estimates, and you'll see more about that coming. I'm happy to answer any quick questions here, Chair Cyphers, if that makes sense, or I can keep going.
Don't see any hands, but, well, oh, there we go, Director Padilla.
Yes, going back to the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 part that you showed, just a question, why would signing a scheduling coordination agreement for the LDS projects be a phase 3 project? I mean, that's kind of a requirement, is that we have to have an SC. So it doesn't feel like that no go would be complicated if we gave participants a choice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I understand what you're saying, Director Padilla. What I probably would probably rephrase it as that's ongoing work in the phase 3 bucket. And it's wrong to include that as a go, no go, because you're right, it is already a requirement of 2 existing projects. So we listed it under phase 3 as some work that's going to go on, but you're right, it's not a decision coming.
Okay. And then just generally, what is the type of work that happens in phase 2? And I'm not sure what a phase 2A versus a phase 2B would be.
Fair point.
If you follow that.
Yeah, the phase 2 is where interested members sign a cost share agreement based on a scope of work and a not to exceed, and where they would participate in actively trying to negotiate to a final signable deal, whatever the topic would be. It could be a power pool concept, or it could be a power project. And the intent there is to have only the interested parties participating and shaping it, and then also only the interested parties paying. So that, and that really maps to us being an a la carte service provider for you guys and the CCOs. So only the interested parties would participate and pay. And that's really what would happen in the phase 2. And we would likely use a project advisory subcommittee there rather than a full committee, so that there's a lot of flexibility to have the right voices without it coming up to the board level. And then we would come to the board at the end of the phase 2, or maybe throughout with briefings, so that the board's in a good position to vote out any eventual end of a phase 2 go, no go decision.
Right, but the general type of work that happens in phase 2 is negotiations. The technical analysis has been completed in phase 1. Generally, phase 2 is trying to get to an agreement. So it's just a lot of negotiation, right? So the main type of expense you would have is external expenses related to legal fees. And then phase 3 being fixed. Or am I missing something in phase 2?
You have it right. I think in some instances, though, there may be additional spending that the project advisory subcommittee would consider. For instance, if there's a very unusual project being considered in phase 2, or a very unusual ownership structure, the decision in phase 2 may be more detailed and expansive than just in phase 1. Phase 1 may tee members up. And for instance, you mentioned what is phase 2A versus 2B. With the build transfer agreement, which was fairly novel for all of us, we weren't sure if there would be enough bids or interesting bids for parties to move forward. So we split the phase 2 into an RFP phase to get a short list that members would pay for. And then only if they were interested would they move forward into the phase 2B. And the reason we split it apart was the phase 2B negotiations would include fairly expensive counsel. And so it felt proper and prudent to separate it, because there was really clear decision in stages of how the BTA phase 2 would work. And so that's how we separated it. And I think we should codify what a 2A versus a 2B is. And I do plan to work a bit with Treasurer Sears on that, because this is another area where we want to build more protocol for CC Power and how we set up these cost structures.
I see Philippe's hand is up as well. Do you have some further
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there's probably also an implementation aspect for some of these phase twos, particularly if you look at the RA Power Pool in the event that we needed to develop a optimization tool to conduct the power pool and facilitate a recommendation on trades between members. Or like in the case of the bill transfer, if we were to have to implement exploration around how do we actually conduct the bond financing to ultimately purchase a project. So as Alex mentioned, it's not just negotiations. There's going to be some technical work that may be involved in some of these phase twos as well to really get to the point where you can actually proceed with a commitment for participation in whatever project it might be at phase three.
Okay. I think that was the question we had at the moment. So why don't you carry on?
Okay, thanks, Chair Cyphers. So we can move to the next slide. So that tees up some expected phase two. And then shifting to the work planning. So again, this starts to look ahead to next June or next July when we start our next fiscal cycle. There'll be a couple of noteworthy updates here. Some of you may recall this slide, which shows that we've used really a two-pronged planning approach. We've used this board-approved strategic plan, and then we've built some annual work plans and resourcing plans using interviews, surveys, and then mapping costs into the phase 1-2 structure. Some improvements we hope to implement this spring. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to lay out the process for work planning a little more in detail. And you see that the colors get sort of less opaque over time, more clear. So as we build clarity towards what we want to do, we start with member interviews and surveys, and that for in many cases what we would like to do is come visit your offices and sit down with you and some of your staff to go through some work planning discussions. We'll also be working with the resource planning working group to brainstorm what should go into our phase ones, what should we look at from their perspective. And we're also going to plan to have a procurement directors meeting. We think the resource planning function is still so core that sitting down with the resource planning directors will probably be a really useful step for work planning. And it'll also make sure that then anything we look at in phase one, there's some sort of basis for why we're looking at that. And last year we did it based off of interviews, surveys, but I think having a hopefully in-person procurement directors meeting will also be really useful. So that's a new feature. We'll then start iterating and finalizing the work plan February into April. And then here's another new feature. We wanted to have perhaps up to 2 different bodies that we work with on the actual budgeting. So once we have the work plan, we're then translating that into dollars. And the 2 levels that we consider, first a staff working group. That would probably involve staff helping us assess what should go into the scope of work of some of this phase 1 work. And then also a board budget advisory group. And Chair Cyphers, I've used the word advisory group. I don't know what the preferred structure may be, but the intent here would be to have perhaps some board members that I can work with to iterate and socialize budget topics, and probably have some direction both ways on that.
Yeah, I'm anticipating we form an ad hoc committee of the board for that purpose. And because they're recommending, they wouldn't need to have powers delegated, I think, from the full board. So that'd be my expectation.
So I can explore working with you to get that set up. Thank you. And then lastly, going up to the board, which
I'm
ultimately
expecting to
decides-
do that in the January meeting or have the new chair do that in the January meeting. If you need it done sooner, do let me know, because I think that would need to be an action in a meeting, I believe.
We'll tee it up in January then. Okay. And then lastly, we'll be updating the full board as the picture becomes clearer, and then sort of landing the decisions to the board, hopefully in April, and at the latest would be June. And the idea here is we want to get the board information as soon as possible on what the sort of likely range of budget requests will be and what the likely work plan would be, so that we make sure it's complementary to any of your work and it also hopefully fits within your budget approval cycles to the extent possible. And I know that's not always the case, And so I'm open to continued feedback for how to do this in ways that work for members.
Yeah, I want to recognize our treasurer. So Director Sears?
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments here. I think this type of structure makes sense, from my perspective, getting a little bit more visibility as projects make their way through a process so that we're prepared as an organization to be able to assess that and make some decisions as we come into our own budget. But Alex, I did have one quick question for you. So you list under the budget process there, third step down, staff working group. What are you envisioning there, and how's that different than the resource plan working group that's made up of CCA staff? The staff working group is, I'm assuming, not CC Power staff?
Correct. Well, so CC Power staff will work on it. Great question, Treasurer Sears. What we have in mind here is probably a subset of the directors, the procurement directors who would work with us, and specifically they're experts at helping us think about how should we look at this idea that happens to be with power services, something or other. So we might want to work with a sub team of procurement directors who can then work with us on scoping out some of the phase one work that then informs what the budget would be. So that's really what the staff working group would be. It would be not you guys as board members, but some of your staff based on who's open and interested or has the right expertise. And then the board budget advisory group, as you know, is really for is likely going to be an ad hoc of the board.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
A suggestion following on Director Sears' question would be to send the board a short description of the activities of that working group so we can recommend the right staff. I think that'll help us pick from our team.
Excellent. We will do that. And a lot of this is going to get started pretty quickly. One of the most urgent items is to start scheduling the first step there, the member interviews and surveys, and to build our list of questions for you all. Chair Cyphers, I see another hand raised.
So Director Hale.
Thank you. My question to pile on, so to speak, with Director Cyphers, the description of what the working group's responsibilities would be helpful, but if you could also include in that how much time you expect they'll need to dedicate to the task, that would also be helpful.
We will do that.
Need to get a sense of the when and the lift.
Okay. Yeah. Just off the top of my head, Director Hale, we expect that to be relatively light on your staff. We would have the work of incorporating input, turning the crank on materials, and then presenting it back to the staff so they could sanity check items and dive deep if they wanted. But we aren't planning to shift a lot of work or require a lot of time on the staff. Primarily, I'm just guessing there would be this in-person meeting in February, and then probably 1 to 2 or 3 hour-long meetings where we're socializing what's coming, how we're putting together the budget. And then if members want to go deeper on the cost estimates, we'd welcome that opportunity, but they wouldn't have to.
That's helpful color. If you could include the expected amount of time and the time frame in your write-up, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Chair Cyphers, I'll move on. So totally shifting now to a specific idea. We've briefed members at times on the RA Power Pool concept. This is still in phase 1. It's been in the work plan. In the last budget cycle, we had teed up this idea academically to see if there might be value. And the thinking at the time was related to the shift to slice of day. And then our project planning then said, okay, there does appear to be value in having some version of a matchmaker pool that's optional for members, but could be useful because having a matchmaker could identify transactions that might otherwise not be known could occur that could deliver value and savings to members. So then the next part of it is to here in Q4, what we're calling the second assessment, where we're doing a more granular design and viability assessment. we had done an academic study before, and what we wanted to do here is better define what value might be available to specific members and under what circumstances. For instance, is there no value if everybody has the same portfolio? Or is there significantly less value if we have 4 members as opposed to 5? So we were going to look at a couple sensitivity cases so that by the time we came back to everyone for a phase 2 go, no go, we'd have a pretty clear sense of what it would take to make this work and what the value on the cost savings on the table could be for members. What we've also found in working with some of your staff, though, is that there's a lot of questions about how this would work. And so one thing that's new is tomorrow we do plan to have a technical discussion with the resource planning working group, and this will allow, we hope to allow a lot of members to provide direct questions with the team we've tasked to help us think through this and conduct the analysis. And we expect it will be a useful and somewhat wonky session that will then further inform the analysis here in the second assessment. I think also it's helping us define what is the proper data request to make of members. When we originally did this, we were using and replicating the CalCCA data request. Some of you know they have certain protocols for getting data from their members, and they then have protocols for how they treat that data and how they use it for considerations of policy matters and what might inform policy. In this case, we were really looking at, for our members specifically, how much value could be on the table under this configuration. So it's a slightly different analysis, but there is overlap, and we have recently approved and had members sign this member participation agreement, which structures the confidentiality provisions by which we can ask for data. I do think we'll see how this goes tomorrow, and then there might be an additional update on this in January before the analysis is concluded.
And just confirming, you're aware of the CalCCA efforts that are parallel, and they were clear in the last board meeting that that the work by that association wasn't going to be dependent or interactive with this effort. But I just want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts too. So as long as you're in communication, all good.
Yeah, we have communicated extensively with Beth and her team on this, and we're pretty clear where there's a little overlap because we're all kind of looking at the same problem. But again, ours is a much more technical sensitivity based analysis of what would work and deliver the most value for members, whereas theirs is informing a system-wide perspective on slice of day, resource adequacy, policy design, is my understanding.
Understood. And potentially the successful implementation here could inform their efforts in advocacy as well. So
and vice versa, if they end up suggesting and ultimately getting an outcome where the RA power rules change, that would then inform us. So there's a healthy amount of iteration back and forth, but a lot of uncertainty on what can happen with the RA program. Okay, Chair Cyphers, I'll move on. So one more technical update, or two more. Later today, you'll see votes for bulk buys. We're presenting you with 2 bulk buys. These costs were actually estimated in the annual budget because these were 2 items we purchased in bulk last year. So we just anticipated the possibility that we would do this again this year. We have members who are interested and ready to sign. One of the deals is basically finalized. The other one, we're still working to finalize it, and there may be some additional bulk buys we're looking at too. The main ones are reports, and then which is the Gridwell report, and then also a service from Wood Mackenzie that has reports and data sets. And the technical data sets can be, many of you and your teams already purchase various data sets from service providers. And so purchasing these at bulk buys can yield significant cost savings for the participating members. So this is a structure where, to the extent we can get into and work with your planning cycle and your teams, there's a chance for us to help you save significant amounts of money. So in the instance where we don't know the exact final cost structure and who's participating, we're teeing up not to exceeds so that we have the flexibility to sort of land the deal appropriately, and then have the right leverage to try and get costs down as much as possible. We can move on to the next slide. Here's just a quick picture of the Wood Mackenzie. So they have a bunch of reports in this informational subscription service. We found it to be very useful for members' needs, and we did talk with a lot of members, many of whom are interested to re-up, or most of whom. And then it also helped us with the resource planning working group, where there's times we want to look at key questions, and then also within our projects, there's times where we wanted to look at key questions. And so having this data set and these reports was useful for us. So I'm just about to wrap up. I'd welcome any further questions, Chair Cyphers, and then I have one more slide.
Not seeing hands. Oh, Director Hale.
It's really just a point of order question. I think what you're talking about in these reports shows up later in the agenda for action. So I'm a little lost as to where you are in the agenda. Are you still in General Manager report?
Yes, I am just in the general manager update about what's coming down the pike, and then we have the specific vote. And you're right, we could have separated this, Director Hale. Good point.
I think
I
we'll,
just,
we'll take public comment twice, because otherwise
yeah, that's
there might be a risk. So
that is why I asked the question. You hit my issue there, Jeff. Thank you.
we'll solve the problem.
Okay. So then lastly, there's only one other final update on the next slide. In terms of, oh, sorry, this is actually really important. I don't want to miss this. So at the beginning of the year, we passed our budget, which included a lot of anticipated spending, and embedded the work plan and translated the work plan into the budget. What we did at the time was we invoiced members for general and administrative dues, so to speak, or costs. And now we also track a lot of your project spending and balancing accounts. And so we're updating the financials that will ripple through all of the balancing accounts. And then if those accounts get low, we're going to re-invoice. We have the approved budget by which we can invoice members. Although in some cases, the approved budget forecasts costs that we now know we will not incur. And so in some instances, you'll see the invoice is lower than the approved budget. And then any balances you have in your balancing accounts will also roll forward to reduce the invoiced amount. So that's what's coming. And then this will also be a chance where all of you can look at your member balancing accounts. So you'll see how much funds we're holding of yours for each one of these projects that you're participating in. So that'll be coming, and those invoices will go out once we have the updated financials. So Chair Cyphers, I said it before, but any questions are welcome here as well.
Not seeing any hands. So why don't you move to your
Okay.
time.
Yeah. So then the last quick item, there's only one activity of note here. We've hired our senior project manager. So you'll recall in the budget that we had over the first of the year plan to bring in additional staff. And we have now hired our third staffer in total, our first staffer within this year, a senior project manager named Mark Burgunder. We're really excited to have him on board. He's going to support a lot of the sort of core functions on procurement activities, deal negotiations, contract administration, and deal flow, all of which we know are high priorities for the board. So we're excited to have Mark on, and you'll see him showing up, including in the attendee set today. Hello, Mark, in the public audience today.
Welcome.
So, yeah. So with that, Chair Cyphers, back to you, and thank you for the chance to update everyone.
Okay, so this is not an action item, but let's call for any public input on 6A, the general manager's report. And since it did touch on some later items, you have 2 shots to comment on those later items, one now and one later. I'm not seeing hands raised, so I think we can move to 6B. And do you want to take that, or should I take that one?
I think you should take it.
Okay, so this, oh, sorry, I see Director Padilla's got a hand.
Okay. One of the things that we do at our board, whenever we bring a new staff person on board, is we have them introduce themselves to the board. If your new staff person is available, I would love to hear from him directly.
Let's take a minute for that. That's a lovely idea.
Hey, Mark, we may, if you're ready, promote you to public or the panelist link, Amy will update that, and we'd welcome a chance to hear from you directly and introduce yourself. Sorry we didn't give you any heads up here.
No, that's okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
hi Mark.
Hey, hi everybody. Thanks for the chance to introduce myself. My name is Mark Bergender. This is my second week, 8th day with CC Power. I joined from Southern California Edison, where I worked in the contract origination team. I was at SCE for 6 years, and I had various roles at the organization, but predominantly in origination, where I managed a handful of solicitations, including the CPE RFO for local RA, our green tariff for renewables and enhanced renewables, enhanced community renewables RFOs, disadvantaged communities solicitations, as well as negotiating power purchase agreements for SCE's RPS and MTR compliance. So I'm happy to bring that experience. I'm happy to meet all of you. I've interacted with some of your staff already, and I'm familiar with them from working with them at SCE and working with them across the table on RA negotiation. So appreciate the warm welcome. Thanks very much.
Very good to have you. Welcome. So I will turn to 6B, and this is really more of just a heads up. So in the January meeting, we will be electing our chair, vice chair, treasurer, controller, and secretary roles. And we've had some interest expressed already, but more, this item is just in the packet to alert you that if there's other folks interested in a role in this upcoming year, let me and Tony Braun, our general counsel, know in advance as a courtesy. You don't have to, of course, but it would be nice just to know if these are going to be contested or uncontested. And then we'll make that election in the January meeting. And I think that's all that needs to be shared in this meeting. It's just an expression of interest would be great. So any public comments on that item? Not seeing any hands. Okay. So let's move on to action. So 6C is an action item. Do you want to just quickly you've already given us a bit of a snapshot, but General Manager Morris, why don't you quickly recap it just for the record?
Yeah, so this action item is about granting us the authority to move forward and purchase or bulk purchase a resource adequacy report from Gridwell for a total not to exceed of $50,000. We think we'll land under that. And that a lot of that negotiation is complete, and we just have been checking in with Gridwell. There are some recent updates. We were going to have a meeting this week to get the download on the report, but because there's been some changes in the load forecast over the CEC, the report's being updated, and so we'll have that sort of report rollout in January. We currently expect 6 members to participate, and those members have seen the anticipated pricing. And so all we need to do now is finalize things pending board approval.
Sounds good. I'm not seeing board comment. Oh, I do see one. So Director Chang.
Just a quick question there. I know for this particular item, we've been engaged on it, but I'm just curious, what level of flexibility is there for other members to still, raise their hand of an interest, or, is this an approval that really sets the exact procurement details of who's seeking those packages and items?
Great question. My understanding of how we've written this is we could still have more members. So this is giving me the authority to move forward based on a not to exceed, and then members still have to sort of opt in through an email exchange. And we have those email exchanges from 6 members. And the more members, the merrier, because all it does is lower costs. So if anyone's still interested, you're welcome to join.
Great. And I guess just on that note, we are ones that are involved. I'm asking this question more broadly for probably this item and the next one, but when is there a specific deadline that we can respond? Just to make sure that folks know when that is.
I think that's a great question. So folks can respond all the way up to, say, January 6th. What we're going to do pending this meeting is sign the contract with Gridwell and start to get them paid and then issue invoices. What I don't want is people to join after we get the briefing from their CEO, Carrie Bentley. That's going to happen in January. So to me, it makes sense that we cut it off in early January so that only members who are interested get to participate at that time. Alternatively, we could let people come in late. They could still get the report. And then what it might mean is CC Power would over collect, or we'd have to reissue refunds, or we could track that in a balancing account. So we could figure that out as well.
I like trying to avoid that scenario if we can. So sounds good.
Thanks.
So I'm not seeing other. Oh, I do see a hand. Director Hale.
I just want to say thanks for the work and I support the item. I move for its adoption.
Okay, we'll look for a second and then check public comment.
Well, second.
So Ava is a second. So let's check on public comment on 6C, authorizing a bulk purchase of resource adequacy report. Not seeing hands on this, so let's call the item.
Ava Clean Community Energy,
Yes.
3CE,
Yes.
Clean Power SF.
Yes.
Believe Peninsula is absent. Redwood
Nope.
Coast Energy
I'm
Authority.
here.
Peninsula has joined about
Oh, I looked.
30 minutes ago or so, something like
Yeah.
that.
Correct.
Sorry, son.
No
Yeah,
worries.
should not go by a grid.
We are a yes on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Redwood Coast Energy Authority.
Yes.
San Jose.
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power.
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So we'll go to 6D, and this will be the bulk purchase of information services and data sets.
Yeah, so in this case, we have a specific data set and information service in mind from Wood Mackenzie. Thanks to Philippe for helping negotiate this. And we have 5, potentially 6 members here. And so we're expecting to see significant cost savings. When one entity can buy this, it typically, you can think of it as about $100,000. We may end up paying a little more than that in total, but those costs will be spread across the participating members. So we'll probably see savings of 60% or more per member for participating in this. So while that deal is not completely finalized, we're very confident that the not to exceed of 125,000 will cover it. And so what we'd like to do is get the board approval today, and then we'll finalize it. And we've already checked in with many of your staff, so we know there's significant interest and we'll likely be moving forward this week.
So checking with the board for any questions or input on this. Not seeing hands, okay. Let me check on public comment before asking for motion. So any public comment on this? Not seeing any, so let's look for a motion.
Yeah, Jeff, I'll move.
I'll second.
Valley and San Jose. All right, let's call this one 6D.
Ava Community Energy.
Yes.
3CE.
Yes.
Clean Power SF.
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy.
We got a thumbs up.
Sorry. Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority.
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy.
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power.
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, and thanks for the good work saving money for your members. I appreciate it. So before switching to closed session, I do want to call item 8 and see if there's any individual member items to share. Anything super noteworthy anyone's done? Not seeing any. Oh, I got one. Director Hale.
Thank you, Director Cyphers. Nothing super noteworthy, just to advise that Mayor Breed has given a citywide directive on travel. So apologies in advance if meetings that you're calling General Manager Morris to be in person. You know, we may have some challenges depending on whether they involve overnight travel. Thank you.
And Director Biondini.
I was just going to share that our large Sandrini solar project in Kern County came online. Yeah, so we're excited that will provide about 40% of our load up here in Humboldt County. So we're
Congratulations.
yeah, it was
Great.
long delayed, like a lot of projects have been, as we all know. So we're really excited it's finally delivering.
Super. I've got a short one. We're still trying to understand the uses of the $15 billion loan the federal government just extended to PG&E. So anyone who's figured that out, let me know. But it's certainly an intriguing story that dropped in the Wall Street Journal yesterday if you haven't seen it. So, okay. So I think, is it Amy Freeman who has sent out a link to the closed session? Okay. So you should have that near the top of your inbox. We will, for any members of the public, be adjourning out of closed session with no report out. So, and then General Manager Morris and General Counsel Braun, if need be, I will text you and ask you to join. But for the moment, we'll start with the board alone in the closed session, and then I will also confirm the end time of the meeting to our clerk as soon as we're done. So I think that finishes the public business for today. And I will see y'all in closed session in a minute or two. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.